The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata, which of course is our own mind. Today is the first day of this February 2024 Sesshin here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico, just a week after we ended the January Sesshin. And as you've heard so many times, this is an incredible opportunity to do 2 Sesshin in quick succession, which means that you don't completely come back up, so to speak, from the first depths you've accomplished during those 7 days before you start another one. So you're actually starting at a deeper level, which is highly advantageous. When I was first at the Rochester Zen Center, living there and going to all the sesshins, Sesshin started on Saturday morning. Well, Sesshin didn't start on Saturday morning. Preparation for Sesshin started on Saturday morning, and then Saturday afternoon was free, and then we would start later in the day with the opening ceremony followed by more zazen. At the time, my anxiety was so high that I did not even dare to leave the building for fear I would flee. It was common for all the other members who were living at the center at the time, there were about 30 some of us, to go in the afternoon after lunch over to the back area of a museum, the back lawn of a museum, where there was an herb garden, and just sit there and enjoy the herbs, enjoy being in a garden. But I dared not to do that, nor even to go out into the backyard of the Rochester Zen Center, which was enclosed by a quite high fence, because again, I was afraid that I would panic and flee. Such was my pre-Sesshin anxiety. And this is a common thing for people. It is, particularly in the early days. It's not so common after you've been to quite a few Sesshin, and in fact, that doesn't exist anymore for me. But in the beginning, the first few years, even perhaps longer than that, before we go into Sesshin, there's a ramping up of anxiety, almost as if we instinctively recognize that we're going to have to let go something really important to us, which of course is our self-image, our sense of being somebody who has certain qualities and certain abilities and also certain drawbacks. And particularly for people who have had any kind of growing up where they were criticized a lot, or where they did things that were then suddenly considered not right, incorrect. And so people get conditioned to being afraid of putting themselves out in public eye. I grew to hate piano recitals for that same reason. And I had good reasons for doing that, because whenever I played a piano recital, except for the very first time, which I was relaxed about and had no inclinations to be anxious about, there was strong and intense criticism. Somehow I could never do it right. I don't think that's a rare occasion for people. I think many people grow up with that kind of thing. Our families are so invested in helping us become the very best people we can that they focus on what we're not doing correctly, even if we haven't had a chance to, for example, practice whatever it is. even though it may be the first time we have done something, and of course, we're very likely to stumble the first time we do something because we just don't know. We don't have the experience of knowing how to do it. Once we get to do it and do it multiple times, we'll be usually pretty good at it. But all of this history can come to the fore when we're about to go to a sesshin. So what do you do with that? It was so strong for me that after about 2 years, I think, at the Rochester Zen Center, 4 of us decided to drive out to Santa Fe. And for I think we had 2 weeks break. And we drove out, had a wonderful time. Driving back, we got to the southern border of Pennsylvania. In order to get back to Rochester, you had to drive all the way up to the top of Pennsylvania, and then all the way up to the top of, or at least to the Lake Ontario of New York State before you got to Rochester. But at the bottom border of Pennsylvania, the panic started hitting. That far away. Thankfully, it doesn't happen anymore. But for many people, the first sesshin or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or maybe more than that, is fraught with anxiety. We try to manage it by shutting down so we don't feel it, which is not effective at all. And we end up having a big challenge. Once we get into sesshin, normally, at least it was for me, the panic begins to ebb. But that may not be for everybody. And it took a while anyway, and I think it ebbed because I just shut down. It was just too threatening for me. I remember the day sesshin started, another Sangha member was tasked with sharpening all the knives in the kitchen. And he was in such a state of anxiety, it was a miracle that he didn't cut himself. Tempers flare, all kinds of compensations happen. Why? Because we are so invested in this set of images that we think we are, along with, if it's a negative set of images, or even a positive set of images, there's a sense of a background, what can we call it? A background feeling that we're fakes. We're just faking it. We're not as good as we think we are. In fact, we're probably really bad. And so it is that which we are instinctively feeling that we are going to have to let go of that is frightening. Because if we let go of that self-image, who are we? How are we going to know how to behave? It's like being in the middle of the town square, naked. It can be that frightening. So what do you do about it? The first thing is to tune in. The felt sense is such an incredible tool to let go. Let go stress, let go anxiety, let go and free up any kind of difficult emotions. And it works. But there's quite a period where we have to develop the ability to do that. We have a resistance to tuning in, because tuning in can, one, if we have a problem with anger, can make us feel like we'll go out of control and we'll hit somebody or throw something or do something terrible because we won't be able to control the anger. That actually is not what happens. If we actually tune into the energy of any difficult feeling, and here I say emotion, and tuning in means feeling the energy of it in our body, then we are free from the tyranny of whatever that is. We're free not to have to react out of that emotion. But it's rare that anybody grows up learning how to do that. Most of us grow up realizing or being told that giving way to negative feelings is a no-no. You're not supposed to get angry, particularly if you're a female. You're not supposed to get sad if you're a guy. There's all kinds of cultural limitations on what we're allowed to see and feel and express. And it's subtle and it's built into the culture. But what we do then, since we don't know how to deal with it, and we don't want to feel it, is we shut it down. We tune out. We try not to feel it. And what that results in is dissociation, blankness, and the darn feeling works in the background. So we're not free of it. In fact, it's controlling us. But if we tune into the energy that we try to escape from because we're afraid that we'll be having to do something we don't want to do if we do feel it, then miracles happen. Suddenly there's space, there's freedom from it. We're not compelled to act on it, and it simply dissolves, leaving a peaceful, harmonious experience in its place. And that's what happens if we tune in fully. We're so practiced at not doing that it takes time, particularly with the more difficult emotions. We have to practice it again and again, trying to tune in more deeply to the energy in our body. Usually we'll recognize, unless we're completely shut down, that we are, for example, angry, but it's like you're standing outside of it and witnessing somebody being angry or feeling angry. That doesn't work. You have to go further into your body and feel the energy that would express anger if you allowed it to do so. And if we're lucky enough to learn that at an early age, then we're not caught by things like anger or sadness, grief, and so on. It doesn't mean that we don't feel them, but we're not controlled by them. We're free of them to feel simply the energy that we would try to escape into our heads normally about in order not to feel those difficult feelings. And instead, the energy can play out, dissolve, run its course in our body, and then there is no anger. So this is how to work with it. You can start by grounding yourself. As soon as you begin to feel like you're zinging out of control, stop, do a deep breath, focus on your feet, touching the ground or touching your shoes or whatever is between your feet and what you're standing on. Focus inwardly on that. Feel it fully. Let the energy fall from your head down to your feet. And you start that by grounding yourself, and then you can tune in to the energy in your body and feel it extensively. And then the whole thing will gradually dissolve. But it does take a long time to do that. You have to practice getting in there. And it's not likely that you'll be able to get in on the first or second or third or fourth try. But you keep trying, and you'd be amazed at the results. And not only that, but the results spread into the rest of your life. It's not just useful in terms of pre-Sesshin jitters. It's useful in every moment of your life. Just think, if when a thought of anger, for example, comes up, and you immediately tune into your body and feel that electric energy, and let it run down your arms or down to your feet or whatever it wants to do, and then that's it. It's not a problem. And if it's anger about something that needs to be done something about, then you're free to work freely to do something about it. You're not driven by anger. It's so interesting that years ago, many years ago, when a whole bunch of us moved out from Rochester to Santa Fe, and one couple got very involved in the peace movement. It was not that long after Vietnam, and they commented that they were part of several different groups, and it was anything but peaceful. Because people argued about how they should make peace. Letting go is something that comes with our practice. And it's important because we cannot be free without letting go. It does take a long time, but every increment of progress in that direction is worth it. And when it comes to pre-Sesshin jitters, they won't be there anymore. We're working on the third chapter of Book 2 of Deepening Zen, the Long Maturation. And it has to do with approaching the precipice. There's a saying in Zen, let go your hold on the cliff and leap hands held high into the fiery abyss. This is a metaphor for how it can feel like when you let go the ideas of who you are and see through them as a false face, a mask, and open to a certain degree at least, the profound depths of what you really are, that original face, that mu, that one hand, and so on. Normally when you do that, it's not a deep recognition, but it's significant. And it's essential to meet that anxiety, that maybe it's even terror, and dare to leap. Metaphorically, of course, because that's when freedom begins to come. This is why we do our Zazen, because we have a sense that we can reach that level of freedom. And it's very real. It's very real. But we have to be willing to let go big time in order to reach that freedom, for it to open up. And the irony is, it's always been there. But we have had such a tenacious hold on a self-image that we miss it. It's covered up. And it's the fear of letting this go that is so challenging in our Zen practice. And that's the edge of the cliff. I'd like to share some news. Those of you who knew Shingen, Edward Byrne, may know that he died of pancreatic cancer some months ago. And his partner, Jose, is going to be spreading his ashes, I think sending them out into the sea, actually spreading them to the sea, in Maui, where they lived for a long time, lived and worked for a long time. On Wednesday evening in Hawaii time, 7 o'clock. That's quite late for us here in New Mexico, so we will, in the second part of Teisho on Wednesday, we will do a chanting service for him. Another thing that's said in that chapter 3 of the book 2 is that the last thing to disappear in the process of dying, which can take a long time, by the way, is hearing. And so often when people die who are Buddhist, there will be chanting for them so that they can hear and be most likely more receptive to the teachings, most specifically the Prajnaparamita, the heart of perfect wisdom. Shingen was quite let go, and he died peacefully in the hospital. The last 2 days of his life, he was quite inwardly absorbed. So I'm sure that his death was quite peaceful. It is said that he had a very peaceful look on his face after he died. I should say after he let go. He'd had decades of Zen practice and also many, many challenges in his life. Those of you who knew him knew that he carried a gene that caused him to fall asleep literally at the drop of a hat. In 53 seconds, he was sound asleep. This was very unique. He had an uncle that had the same problem, and it is a genetic thing. He would fall asleep fully closed into swimming pools. He was working at a hotel, by the way, and serving around the swimming pool, so it was an easy thing for him to do. He would drop sound asleep in the middle of a sidewalk. People would just step over him. He learned far long ago to simply let go any idea of embarrassment or anything to defend as part of that process. And I think that's probably a good part of how he was able to die so peacefully. He also, of course, had all those decades of Sesshin time. So he was a very remarkable person. Those of you who knew him as joyful and interesting, fascinating human being with the most great ability to tell stories in very entertaining ways. It was his second experience of cancer. He had beat out lymphoma, a very aggressive lymphoma, some years earlier. But then suddenly, as is common in terms of pancreatic cancer, he was not diagnosed until it was stage 4, which is basically a death sentence. And he died about 4 months, I think, after he was diagnosed. But he was completely one with it. He did what he could in terms of treatment, but then when it was time to let go, he let go. This is something that we all seek to emulate. At the time of our death, to simply relax and let go. Death is a greatly feared thing in the Western world. And for many decades, centuries really, we've kept it out of sight. My aunt, for example, when my uncle was dying of pancreatic cancer, would not let his children, their children, come and visit him in the hospital because she wanted them to remember him as he had been. Unfortunately, that leaves out any possibility of coming to terms with the dying of somebody very special in your life. But what is death? In Buddhism, it is taught that life is eternal, as it's taught in many religions, actually. But not that you go to heaven or hell, depending on how you were in this life. In a sense, it's sort of true, but heaven and hell are right here now within your own being, depending on your behavior and your expectations and your experiences. And when you die, it is said that your last thought is most important because that is what sends you on your way into the next life, whatever it will be. So if it's full of pain and anguish and rage, your next life is going to reflect that. If it's filled with peace and ease, the same thing. If you go fighting, dying, then that also will affect your next life. But if life continues, and we have control over how we behave, ultimately, yes, there are extenuating circumstances. If we're traumatized, for example, we have a lot to work with to become free of that effects of that trauma and the compensating behavior we use to deal with it. But we're in the steering seat. And while in some cases trauma can be so intense that it's going to be more than one lifetime before we're able to work through it, and things, for example, like mental illness, bipolar in particular, when one has the profound depression that can happen with that, or the profound highs that can also happen with that, then those two impact life right now and also our process of death and what happens next. Shido Bunan, who was Hakuin's grandfather in Zen, wrote, "If you die before you die, you won't die when you die." By that he meant, if you let go your ideas of who you are and allow yourself to simply be your true self, then dying is not going to be a problem. So at any rate, at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, we will do a chanting service for Shingen. And I thank you for listening. This is rather short, but that's fine. I have another announcement to make after this off the recording.